I am Stephanie King. Today's date is February 17th, 2016, and we're in San Antonio, Texas.
And I'm Joe Condrill, and today's date is February 17th, 2016, in San Antonio, Texas, and we're friends.
And we're friends. We recently became friends. We met
Yes.
at a networking event where friends of yours were singing your praises, telling me all about your wonderful accomplishments. It's an
Oh,
honor to be here with you, Joe.
my goodness. I'm so grateful that you even told me about StoryCorps and are willing to do this interview with me.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. I'd like to start out with your profile. Is that okay? I'd like to just document highlights of your career as we get started.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
This is a profile of an ordinary woman who accomplished extraordinary things and went remarkable distances. This is a lesson in opportunities for all women. Jo Condrill is such a woman. A former Pentagon leader and war college graduate, Jo is president of Gold Mines, Inc. That's GOALMINDS.com, teaching women how to achieve what they once thought were impossible dreams. Her road to this place began ordinarily enough. She graduated from high school in San Antonio, Texas, became a military bride, traveling all over Europe, camping in Italy, Switzerland, Germany, Holland, began a government career at Kelly Air Force Base, worked for the U.S. Air Force Munitions Directorate in Germany, and nursed two of her sons through medical emergencies. Back in the U.S., she became divorced. Then her life began to evolve into something different as she went on to work in leadership positions at the Pentagon as a civilian. Imagine what it's like to be a female civilian telling military officers what to do. She's a graduate of the Army War College, the Army School for Training Upper Echelon Officers and Top Civilians in Strategic Leadership, where she wrote an award-winning research paper on civilians on the battlefield in 1993. She went on to be responsible for logistics on the burial of the unknown serviceman from Vietnam in 1984. She went on to be awarded the Army's highest civilian award, the Decoration for Exceptional Civilian Service, in 97. She was elected the district governor of Toastmasters in Washington, D.C., and led them to the #1 in the world position, the only time they ever achieved such a distinction, in 1991 through 92. Jo is the author of 4 books: 100 Ways to Improve Your Communication Skills Instantly, Take Charge of Your Life, and From Book Signing to Bookseller, an insider's guide to conducting a successful low-cost book signing tour, and Quick and Easy Communication Tips and other ebooks. She was elected to the board of directors of Toastmasters International. She received an Export Achievement Certificate from the U.S. Department of Commerce for accomplishments in the global marketplace. She received a presidential citation from the president of Toastmasters International for outstanding contributions to the organization and its program of communication and leadership. And she received a Ford Motor Company Greater San Antonio Chamber of Commerce WOW Award for Women Business Leaders. Jo is a mother of 4 adult children. She resides in San Antonio, Texas. Boy, Jo, you have done some things in your life.
Well, when you live long enough, you have time to do all those things.
I'd like to start out by asking you, how do you feel about being here today and in this interview?
Well, I was a little rushed getting here. There were a lot of things I had to do before I got here. But right now, I feel grateful, and I feel grateful to you for having brought it to my attention, and I feel grateful to StoryCorps and the volunteers who make this available, and the National Public Radio for promoting it and seeing the value of it, because I totally agree that the human story, as we live it every day and as we see it from our own eyes, has tremendous value for future generations.
Yes, it does. I think about relatives that have passed on that I just wish I could have talked to and heard their stories. As you look back on all of your accomplishments, what stands out as the most rewarding to you?
For the longest time, and I think still, one of the most rewarding is the burial of the unknown servicemen from Vietnam. It was my first job with the Army. I had gone to the Washington area with the Air Force and then switched over because I saw there were more civilian positions with the Army forces. And right away I had to get a top secret clearance because at that time, you may recall, during the Vietnam era, there were those people, those antagonists who were totally against the veterans at that time. And so the planning for the funeral, which was equivalent to the burial of a president of the United States, would have been opposed by a number of people. That had a lot to do with the secrecy that surrounded it and the way it was carried out. Now I know that unknown has been identified since the burial, but I think it's no less significant because that the remains have been identified thanks to technology advances. Because I believe that most of the veterans who knew about it, the Vietnam veterans, felt like maybe some of the shame that they were put through when they came back from Vietnam was erased because of that recognition. I met a man that was a Vietnam veteran at the airport in Los Angeles. This may take a few minutes, but I think it's significant. This man reminded me of one of the Snoopy cartoons, you know, the kid that had the cloud over his head, and it seemed like this man was standing under a dark cloud on a sunny day. It was just an aura like around him, and I never experienced anything like that. When we got on the shuttle bus and he took us to our residence or the hotel, and this man sat next to me, I initiated a conversation and welcome to Los Angeles and, you know, do you live here and that kind of stuff. And eventually, somehow he knew I worked with the military and worked in the Pentagon. And he told me about when he returned to San Bernardino after Vietnam and they threw stuff at him. He said it was stuff I couldn't even mention in public. It was so awful. And even that day, it was still with him as a burden he carried. And after we talked a little while, I said, you know, there's services, you know, do you have military hospitals? He lived in West Virginia. Do you have military? Oh, yeah, some of the finest military hospitals. But I couldn't do that because it would look bad on the Corps. And I thought, oh, no, you know, it's okay to talk. It's okay. You know, you really, you know, you could do that. He said he had cried his last time. He had cried when he buried his mother. He cried when he buried his father. And when it gets too hard for him, he walks in the woods and he cries. That just tore my heart out, you know, because here's this man who didn't have any say of whether we should go to Vietnam or not. I mean, put that on a politician. The military's just carrying out their orders and getting killed for it and then trashed when they get home. You know, I hope to God that never happens to our military again. It's a blight on that time in our history as far as I'm concerned. I got off the bus before he did. He was sitting next to me. He took my hand and he kissed it. I thought, well, at least, you know, maybe that was a ray of sunlight for him. And I took a bouquet of flowers to his hotel. I left it at the desk.
That's beautiful.
It said, welcome home. But I didn't tell this story for that ending. I told the story because I think not enough people appreciate what we did to those veterans and why some of them are still to this day suffering and homeless and all of that.
Because of that
Though they're-
tumultuous time and people's attitudes
Mhm,
toward the war that made them turn on the vets.
mhm.
Has, of course, the military and the veterans, the active duty members, that attitude has all changed now. But there still are lingering people
Mhm.
out there carrying that burden.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's really sad.
I want to go back in your life and ask you, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, I was so busy growing up. There were 6 of us children, and I was the second to the oldest. The youngest one is something like 18 years younger than I am, so there's quite a stretch. But I got into my amount of mischief. I enjoyed life. I still enjoy life. And what was your question?
What did you think you would be when you grew up?
I never really thought about it. When it got close to making that decision, I kind of wanted to go to college, but most of all, I wanted to get out of the house. I wanted to be on my own. I wanted to be myself, which is a current popular thing, I think. But my dad said, well, I can't pay to send you away. So I had gotten a job when I was a senior with the telephone company, so I just kept working and then dating, and then got married, had 4 kids, and started taking college part-time. I worked at St. Mary's University for a while, and they were giving free classes if you worked there, so I thought that's money in the bank. So I got 9 credit hours while I worked there, and very grateful. That started me on the 20 years it took me to get my degree. So I would say never give up. Never give up.
Never give up.
And be ready to change.
Even if you don't know exactly what direction you're going in, it seems like you just seized opportunities as you went along.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned your father.
Mm-hmm.
You've since lost your father, is that right?
Yes, he passed away in 1991 in May.
What do you most miss about him?
I miss his laughter, and I think he had a love of life. He was a hardworking person. He didn't have much education, but when we moved to San Antonio, he started a business of his own, and he hired people. And I always had a lot of respect for him because he would read books. He would hire, he had an attorney, he had an accountant, and those kinds of things, the people he needed, and he was very successful. When times were hard, one of the things that impressed me was his men, and they were men because they were basically laborers, because he was doing remodeling on the houses and that kind of stuff. And they always got paid. So, we may have to ratchet down on the type of meals we had, but his people got paid.
What lessons did you learn from him?
He always hammered, well, I won't say that, because his motto was, there's no such thing as can't. If you want it bad enough, you can do it. And Napoleon Hill says the same thing. That's the first principle, is you've got to have desire. You have to know what you want. And so that's the first step in my Take Charge of Your Life book, is you got to figure out what you want. That's one of the things that really holds us back is, first of all, we're so busy. We're putting out fires, we're putting Band-Aids on kids, we're worrying about our next job or our next date. But we don't take time to just sit back and think about ourselves and our future. Another thing we don't think about is the effect we're having on other people. And I see so many parents putting their kids down so bad. I think, God, if you only knew what you're doing to that child's self-esteem, you would stop it right now. I just think we need to think more.
Is that a thread throughout your books? The theme of taking charge of your life and knowing what it is you want out of life?
Yeah, that's just the first step. The first step is knowing, and then you need to know what the obstacles are. What are you facing? Sometimes we only look at the obstacles and say, I can't. But if you look long enough, you might see some resources that you didn't realize you really had. Because that's what I encourage is if you really want it bad enough, you'll find a way to get it. Whether it's getting a loan or getting a second job or maybe a third job. I've heard of people having 3 jobs and, being a parent at the same time, which, is commendable if they're doing good in all of those things and not shirking one to shore up the other. But it's again, taking time to think. We've got to think about what we want. And that's not saying it's got to be locked in forever and ever. And some people don't think about what I want because, well, I may not want that next year, 3 years down the road. Okay. But while you're getting there, you're making strides and learning things that you wouldn't have learned before that you can apply to something else. So you can change that final, in quotation marks, destination. You can always change, but you have to have some direction so that you can focus and take one step in front of the other one and in front of the other ones. I'll tell you one of the things I think that holds people back a lot, especially women, is risk. We're afraid we'll fail, and so we don't go out there. I never knew that there was a possibility of working in the Pentagon, except when I was working on the burial of the unknown from Vietnam. Now, we had the support of the drivers from the Pentagon for the burial. We had to get all the cars for the cortege and all of that stuff, but it really opened my eyes to over 20,000 people working in this one building. There must be a place for me. And the first time I got up there, it was like a developmental assignment. And then it was a temporary assignment. And then it was a good regular promotion. And then it was a step up to being a supervisor. So, you got to take those risks. You've got to look out and see what's out there and what really will add value to what you're doing and happiness in the long term.
Those were big steps for a woman during that time. Is that right?
You
You blazed some trails.
Yeah, yeah.
How so?
Well, I think it was probably a little more difficult in the War College because I know that some of those senior officers, it is a senior service school. That's the highest level school for the Army, and most of those people there eventually made general. But some of them could see that I was taking up a slot that another man who had been a commander could fill. There were like 13 of us civilians in that class, but there were also a number of foreign officers. So it was a very challenging, but it was a very exciting time.
Yes, it was. I mean, just listening to you talk, even not hearing the interview about the difficulties that you faced in moving up while you were at the Pentagon. I mean, women have much to be thankful for what you did and the trails that you did blaze.
Oh, I had quite a number of challenges there. Oh, yes. Yeah. But the worst challenge was to my integrity when this man accused me of pre-selecting someone for a position. And I fought it, and I fought it, and I fought it all the way up to the third ranking man in the Army. And the best he could do was say, would you be willing to re-interview the people? Which I did, and the board of people that had been selected to sit in on that agreed with my selection. So I was vindicated in the long run. I had an officer, a military officer, tell me I would never have pursued it. I would have just dropped it. I never drop it if it's saying that I did something dishonest. That's a blight on my character as far as I'm concerned, and I'll do everything I can to straighten the record so that I don't have to live with that.
I'd like to turn for a moment back to your personal life.
Okay.
Your mother is still with you.
Yes.
How is she?
She's doing all right. She has Alzheimer's. In fact, she's the reason I'm in San Antonio. She's 101 years old now, and she doesn't actually speak. Sometimes she's able to try and say something, but it's, you can't understand it. But she can look at you even though she has macular degeneration, which affects her vision tremendously. But I maintain that we never know what that person who seems to be incapacitated can understand. And so I think everybody should be careful what they say, and in front of within the hearing of somebody they think can't understand what they're saying. I talk to my mother when I visit her, and I visit her at least once a week. And I talk to her, and sometimes she'll look me right in the eye as though, she's understanding me. And so I just talk to her and tell her I love her.
So how are you doing with all of that that's happening with your mother? How do you feel about that?
Well, it was a difficult decision to actually get her into a skilled nursing facility. But she had been living with my sister on a ranch, and she didn't like it there to begin with. And then when she began to go deeper into Alzheimer's, we knew we needed help with her. And so I moved back to San Antonio because none of my siblings lived here any longer. And I was the only single one, and I thought that I could easily relocate my business here. So it wasn't as easy as I thought in the long run, but I think the decision was good because she has had good care.
Mm-hmm. And you check on her. You're there for her.
Oh, yeah.
Joe, do you believe in God?
Oh, I strongly believe in God. I think he's the reason that I'm still alive, for one thing, and he's the reason that I still have my mental faculties and I have good health. And I think he's a good God. I think regardless of the tragedies we sometimes face, God is a good God. He cares for us, and in the long run watches over us. And I believe in his Blessed Virgin Mary, too.
When it's time to go to heaven and you get there, what would you like to say to God?
Thank you. That's what I would say. I would fall at his feet and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. Every morning I write, I am grateful for. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Lord.
You keep a journal?
Well, it's not exactly a journal. It's just a short way I begin my day. That's my ritual. I get up in the morning and have a cup of coffee. Well, generally, that's probably not a good thing, but I sit there and I write it. And if something special happened the day before that I need to be grateful for, I'll add that to it. But I never ask for anything in it. It's all gratitude.
Why did you start doing that?
I had somebody on the internet emailed me, and it was like a gratitude log, and they wanted people to contribute to it. And I thought, well, I don't need to be public about that. I need to be private about that. And so that spurred me to do that. And so I think it's a good practice, and it gets your day on a positive note, thinking what's right with the world and what's good happening to me. And so often all we focus on is the bad things and try to correct the bad things that are happening to us. But I maintain that if you look at the good things, you won't even worry about the bad things. They'll take care of themselves.
I actually keep a gratitude journal also.
All right,
It's a little hardback book that says Gratitude Journal. And I'm in it most days also.
Good for you.
So I know how good it feels when we can express that gratitude.
We're on the same wavelength.
What brings you joy these days?
Oh, I don't know, almost anything. I love to see people happy. I love to see people overcoming what they thought were obstacles, and I like to think I can help them. And being with my children, although they're grown, they don't all live here in San Antonio. I have one son who lives here, one in California. My daughter's in Midland, and I have another son up in Sweetwater, Texas. I like that name, Sweetwater. It's It's near Abilene, I think. But anyway, so I love my children. I love people. I love doing things. And I love my computer, too. I'm on the computer a lot.
You are tech savvy. I remember you invited me to your house and took me to your kitchen table and showed me programs I'd never seen before. And I thought I was tech savvy. I'm a video producer, but you showed me some things.
Yeah, I know some people can see my age and they're looking there and they don't expect me to know what I'm talking about. These technicians and these technically qualified people. I'm not as tech savvy as I need to be, but I'll get there.
Joe, you retired some years ago, but you never stopped moving. What's keeping you motivated?
I don't know. I guess I'm addicted to doing things and just being. God's given me life. He's blessed me with good health, and so I'm energized. And so don't get me wrong. I have been through some stages where I get and like maybe I don't feel well, and so you just kick yourself in the butt and say, hey, get over it.
Tell us about Toastmasters, and has that kept you going also?
Toastmasters really was a foundation for me, that and Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich. I have to start with Think and Grow Rich because reading that book came first and really changed my life, because it opened up things I never knew were possibilities and things that I thought I needed to learn more about and gear myself more toward it, like persistence, and there's a my Toastmasters.
They'd be on you for that. But you're okay in here.
And then when I started Toastmasters, I was scared to death. What kicked me into Toastmasters was an event in California where I was visiting my older sister and her family. And we were sitting around the picnic table, the adults and the kids were playing, and my brother-in-law had recently joined Toastmasters. I think he had only attended one meeting, and he started homing in on my ums and ahs and you knows, and he was critiquing it. And so I just shut up. I thought, well, there's no point in me talking because I'm making so many mistakes. I'm making a fool of myself. When I went to Washington, D.C., in the Air Force office, the secretary was the Toastmaster, and she invited me to a meeting. Well, my self-esteem was so low. I said, I know I need it, but give me some time. I'll get settled in and I'll go. So like 3 months later, I went to my first meeting, and everybody seemed like a professional. I thought, I'll never be able to do this. So when I had to give my first speech, I held on to the side of the table. I closed my eyes and I prayed, don't let me pass out. So I got through it okay. And it has built my confidence all along. I think that's what helped me survive in the Pentagon, truly, because at the same time I was still a Toastmaster. And so you get a little steel in your spine, and you're able to, I could tell you another story, but we're probably running out of time.
No, tell me.
When I was the deputy in charge of the office, once when my boss was gone, we were going through that time of the year where we battle for force structure, for how many logisticians we have compared to the fighters. And I was in the logistics business, so we had a new major in the office, and he was going to be the one to go and stand in for us because I didn't go and do the work. I was the supervisor, and so they went to bat for us. So I was explaining the process and what we needed to do. Well, he didn't think that was right. He had a better way. And so I said, no, we're going to do it the way we've been doing it. It's been successful, and this is the path you need to follow. He became so angry, he got up from the conference table we were seated at, went out into the hallway into the area where the secretary sat. There was a metal filing cabinet, and he started banging on it. I mean, he was just going at it, and the people in the office, I could see them running for their own cubicles. They had been, elsewhere in the office, and it was like a cloud was hanging over. The general's office was right across the hall. So my immediate thinking was, okay, if I stand here toe to toe with him, there's not going to be a winner in this. This isn't going to, be good for anybody. And I don't know where the thought came from. I turned on my heels without saying a word. I went into my office and closed the door. Everybody else was in a cubicle. I had a door. He banged on it for a little while, and then he stopped. The executive officer came from the general's office and opened my door and looked in, and he said, "Joe, is everything all right?" And I said, "Yes." He closed the door, went back across the hall. That was the greatest affirmation I ever had, because I knew they trusted me to handle the situation. After a while, the major settled down, and he came back in and meekly apologized, and we went on and finished our business. Now, I'll tell you, when the Pentagon was attacked, I had had a message a few days earlier from the man who replaced me. And it had, instead of having a blind carbon copy, he had a whole string of people list addresses there. So I sent a message out to that whole list and said, "Does anybody know anything?" And for a couple of days, it was like, I saw so-and-so saw so-and-so, so, we know that one's okay, and this one's okay, and that one's okay. This particular major had progressed. He had actually, I guess, retired or left the Army. He was working as a civilian in a government building across the way. And he got in touch with me and was very friendly and trying to help me find the people that were missing. And it was kind of like a closure, because shortly after that incident, he got himself transferred out of the office. He was a father of 5 and a stay-at-home mother, and so I just think having a civilian woman was more than he could take. And God bless him. Sure. He went on his way. And
did you lose anyone on 9/11?
We lost 4 Toastmasters in the Pentagon. I personally did not, but I know that we had Toastmasters involved in New York City, and one of my dear friends had his best friend was in one of the buildings that collapsed, and he actually worked there and was going there. He got there just as the building was coming down. They said he was in therapy for a couple of years afterwards. But that's the closest I came. Now, the thing that saved us was that they were renovating the Pentagon, and our office had moved. And so the people on the first floor who had been under us, on the floor beneath us, were still there. And they lost 2 of their administrative people, and the officer that was there had gone to the bathroom, and he was so badly burned, he was in the hospital, either in intensive care or somewhere in the hospital for like 18 months. Now he's in public office now. He was a really good man, and his faith, he credited his faith in his family with bringing him through it. It was an awful time, but they repaired the facade very quickly. As soon as I saw that plane came in where the helipad was, I knew, because our general's office was right there by that helipad. I knew we were in trouble.
Mm-hmm. Because of 9/11, do you feel less safe in America?
No. I think I feel like we are going to be attacked from within at some point. We're going to have another 9/11, but I think we should be better prepared now. At that time, the agencies weren't talking to each other, which caused a lot of problems, and I wrote something about that too, and how to get over it with the mastermind principle, which is one of the things our general did in calling the various agencies and civilian agencies even together to handle Desert Storm, Desert Shield. So I think it will come, but we'll be better prepared, and I think as civilians, we won't be relying so much on sitting there and having somebody come to save us. We'll be better prepared to look out for ourselves, and we definitely should be. We've got plenty of warning. Not that you have to stockpile food and all of that stuff, which
Right.
probably isn't a bad idea, but when I was in Real Simple magazine, they asked me, what advice would you give? I said, keep a 5-gallon water, 5 gallons of water handy,
And why did you give that advice?
because I couldn't think of anything else to say. I felt really stupid when I saw it in print.
But it really isn't a bad idea.
Think what you could do. You could boil beans. You could boil rice.
You could do a bird bath. I mean, so as we begin to wrap up, how would you like to be remembered?
I've told a few people what I want written on my epitaph, on my tombstone, is she lived every minute of her life. For a while there, I called myself an encourager. And I still think I am an encourager because I like to help people up. I have felt really blessed, and I know even when I was working in the Pentagon and had worked my way up to higher, I like to help my family, and do something for them because I felt privileged. I had done something, and so I wanted to share it. And so I think of myself as an encourager. Even today, I'd rather see you do something than me clawing my way up to another.
What's in store for you?
I want to write a bestseller. And I think maybe my Take Charge of Your Life, Dare to Pursue Your Dreams might be the groundwork for that. Because at least one person said publicly, and I was in the audience when she said it, that it had ultimately saved her life. And I've gotten a lot of really good feedback on that. And so it's the core of everything I do, really, because we can take charge of our lives. It's not to say we don't need a creator, that we are God, but that we're co-creators with God, and we take responsibility for how our life's turning out. And if we don't like it, we need to figure out what we're doing that's causing us not to like it.
Joe, is there anything that you would like to say that I have not asked you? Any parting words?
I can't think of anything. I can think that at a younger age, we grew up on the south side of San Antonio, probably lower middle income, but we never looked at ourselves as being poor. I know we didn't have as much money as our next door neighbor, but we were happy, and our vacations were trips to the beach in near Rockport and Corpus Christi, and we camped out on the beach. It was safe. It was wonderful. My father eventually had a boat, and we'd go out, and it was just wonderful. So life is what you make it, I think, and is you have a positive mental attitude and keep thinking positive, you'll enjoy life a lot more. And I'm not talking about you because you do. This isn't preaching.
But I'm listening. I'm taking it all in.
It would be preaching to the choir, as they say. So that's, I think, it. I just would encourage people to encourage other people, and especially children. Children need to be thanked and appreciated and loved instead of corrected all the time. Now, they don't need to be spoiled, and the parent doesn't need to be a child. So there is a responsibility on the parents that I think sometimes is not being fulfilled nowadays. When we give our children everything, we need to be judicious in that, and so that they're able to cope with things that may come their way.
Well, Joe, this has been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. I'm so glad that you told me about this.
It's been great getting to know you.
Well, thank you, and we'll turn the tables sometime, and I'll be the interviewer.
We've been talking to Joe Condrill of San Antonio, Texas. It's been a wonderful opportunity. Thank you to StoryCorps.
Thank you, Stephanie.